Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is CJ and welcome back to Exotic Nootropics. Today we're going to be going over how we look after the Amazon milk frogs. I'm deciding to do this as a vertical video so that it focuses on the enclosure and nothing around the enclosure because I don't want anyone to get distracted or anything. But yeah, we're just going to go over basically the way that we look after these. People will do it in a different way. Everyone will do things in a different way, but this is the way that it works for us. So right now, there is a car alarm going off. Right now, there's a lot of crickets and things that are currently sitting in the enclosure. You can see some of them up here on this bamboo that's sticking out. One thing that is worth noting with this enclosure is it was a rush job. I got these frogs very randomly. It was not planned. I met someone, they were like, oh, I've got these Amazon milk frogs that I really want to get rid of. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really like Amazon milk frogs. I'd love to take them off your hands. And that's kind of how I got these. They were not in this enclosure, they were in a much smaller enclosure, which smelt like damp and rot, to be honest. So, not good. And I put them in here with a bunch of paper towel at the bottom. And I came back one day from work, and one of the frogs had eaten half of a paper towel, and I had to pull it out of the frog. The paper towel had turned blue because their blood is blue. So it was a bit of a nightmare. As soon as that happened, I was like, okay, I need to build this enclosure properly. And all I did was I grabbed basically everything that I could and threw together this enclosure. If I were to do it properly, I'd love to do like a waterfall and all of that. And obviously, it would be built up to the top, like all the lizard enclosures are. So it'd be going right all the way up. But I did not have the time that I had for the lizard enclosures. For the lizard enclosures, I had a couple of weeks because they were being looked after by a reptile center. But the frogs, I just didn't have that time. So I just shoved everything in. It looked completely different when it was done because all the plants were much younger and not as mature. But although this is a very temporary setup, it's worked really well for them and they seem pretty happy. The only thing that I do recommend is probably getting a bigger enclosure in terms of horizontal width because they jump around a lot and they jump a long way. And when you've got an enclosure that's only this size, they're slapping against the glass all the time. You do hear them jump on the leaves as well. It's like that's obviously what they're used to in the wild. But slapping against glass cannot be the most fun thing ever. So I'm just going to open the door here and hopefully not disturb any of them. You can see that the doors are really dirty. All the glass is really dirty all the time because what happens is the frogs will jump everywhere, get all of the rubbish on them because they go sticky when they're not moist, and all of the crap that's around the enclosure will get stuck on the glass when they jump onto the glass. Their skin gets stuck on the glass. Everything just sticks to the frogs and gets stuck to the glass, basically. Okay, so here we are in the enclosure, kind of. This is the outside. You can see Froggo right here. There's also a frog all the way up here. This system right here is part of the watering system. They get misted twice a day along with the lizards. They're all part of the same system. It's all connected. And this is the Mist King Ultimate. It's one of the more expensive Mist Kings. It's basically so that you can have as many nozzles as you want. I can't remember how many is allowed on this one. But if you look over here, you can see the crickets just chilling there. They're just kind of jumping around the enclosure. Clearly the frogs haven't been too interested in them lately. There's another frog there. But yeah, that's one of the main things is that rain system, making sure that the humidity is nice and high. And then down here, okay, so you can see here is a dish and it's literally full of water right now. Every single day I swap out this water, make sure it's completely clean so that they can go into it and just sit in the water. That's how they drink. So they have to have puddles of water that they can basically soak up through their skin. That's how these literally, they drink all their water that way. So it's super important making sure that this water is clean, because you don't want them soaking up any basically bad stuff. This water is tap water, which has a dechlorinator in it and something that gets rid of the heavy metals, dilutes all the horrible stuff. And the rain system uses something which basically is from a water butt outside. All the water from the water butt outside, it sits in a reservoir, and I harvest it from that reservoir. I then boil that water. So I boil it to kill any microorganisms, bacteria, or anything in it. And then it goes into the sump, I guess, which feeds the water for the rain system. So the water for the rain system is not from the tap, it is actually rain from outside. One thing that I do find a bit unfortunate with the Amazon tree frogs is that they only eat insects. I do really like animals that eat fruit and insects, although we've also got a tokay gecko who could eat fruit and insects, but she will never eat any fruit. She will only eat things that are moving, which makes sense. It's in her nature. She's very aggressive. But the giant day gecko obviously loves fruit and would rather fruit than insects, but we give him fruit and insects over time. So with the frogs, you have to look after those crickets. We feed them crickets mainly. We also feed them large morio worms every now and then. But the staple diet is definitely crickets. They're easier to take care of. All of our species eat crickets, so it makes everything a lot more simple. The temperature in this frog enclosure is constantly at 24 degrees. It's literally a thermostat that does not change. I've set it at 24 because it's not too hot and it's not too cold. It's like a nice temperature. It's probably more ideal to have that drop at night and have the temperature be like 28 degrees or whatever it needs to. I think it's 26 for Amazon milk frogs. Please take a Google of that, because I don't want you to cook your milk frogs. One thing that is worth mentioning with these, you have to be careful of them getting too hot. Like, they are more susceptible to heat damage than lizards are, for example. And they're just a very, very different species, and you don't realize that until you actually get frogs. And it's mainly because of their skin and how they absorb that water. You need to be extra careful with what they're given. Something that people really love to give their milk frogs, or tree frogs in general, are bromeliads. They're not going to drink from the bromeliads. If you get a huge bromeliad, then they'll probably sit in the water in there, and that's how they'll soak up that water. But normally that's not the greatest, because nothing is breaking down that dirt that's within the bromeliad. Whereas when you've got puddles, then you can literally just swap out the water, and that's their main source. They love going down in the puddles. You see them down there as soon as they actually wake up. So they're a nocturnal species, that's worth mentioning. So they only come out at night. During the day, they are completely still, unless you go around messing with them. If you are going to handle them, then you need to be really careful as to what's on your hands. It's best to wear gloves, again, because of their skin just soaking up everything. It's the problem when it comes to frogs, because their skin soaks everything in. If you've got soap on your hands, you're going to poison them. Talking about poison, they get their name, Amazon milk frog, from, I believe it's some sort of a poison. It's a substance that they secrete on their back when they feel like they're under threat. And supposedly it smells bad, and I'm assuming it tastes bad. I don't know if it's actually poison at all. But it's worth mentioning that it's probably best to wash your hands after handling any milk frog if you haven't handled them with gloves on, which normally, although obviously people are told to handle them with gloves on when they're your pets, you're not necessarily going to do that. For example, sometimes I open this, I think it was about 2 weeks after I got them, I opened up the enclosure to spray them down, and one of them jumped onto my face and then jumped off my face, and it's like, okay, brilliant. So now I've got to wash my face. You know, stuff like that happens. They are pets. They are going to do random things, and you're just going to have to deal with it. So bearing in mind that they're probably not the best thing for you to consume in any way, shape, or form is probably good for you to know. At the top of this enclosure, we have a Jungle Dawn, which is literally just an LED light bar, which is for growing plants, and it also helps stimulate the frogs. We have exactly the same for the lizards as well. They've all got Jungle Dawns because they're all jungle species, which is kind of what we specialize in here. There's also a UVB bar, which is the old Arcadia bar. It's not a luminize. All the other enclosures in here have luminize. This has the base LED bar and also the base UV bar. So it's base Jungle Dawn and base UV. As these are a tree frog, they don't need a very strong UVB. The giant day gecko probably needs slightly more UVB, and the tokay gecko needs slightly less. There is a guide on Arcadia's website which you can take a look at, which I'll put a link in the description. And I'll just give you a quick guide on some plants that are just, I believe, are really good to give to your frogs. So the first thing is a bromeliad. Any sort of bromeliad that doesn't have any toxins in it at all, which I think is the majority of bromeliad. You could have a look at a Guzmania. Is it Guzmania? Oh, I think it's Guzmania. You could have a look at those, make sure that they're not poisonous because they're nice and big. You want as big a bromeliad as possible. While I'm talking about plants, actually it's worth mentioning as well that Amazon milk frogs should be kept in groups of 4 plus, so at least 4 animals. You can see here that obviously an Calathea orbifolia is one of my favorites, and I think you really should have the majority of the enclosure taken up by something like an orbifolia, where it can hold the frog's weight and it can really just flush everything out, like super big bushy plant. It provides them with places to hide if they want it. It also gives lots of shade, and the insects will love it. It's a nice surface area for rain to clump up on. I just very much recommend it. In here we also have a pile of palm, which I do not recommend. I don't recommend that in any enclosures really. It always struggles. We've also got some live bamboo, which I don't really recommend bamboo unless you've got an absolutely massive enclosure, and I mean massive, like larger than you can get from a pet store. Larger than the largest Exoterra. You want as tall as possible. So I certainly don't recommend having bamboo in an enclosure like this, like I've done. There was also a banana plant in here, but it got absolutely wrecked by the Calathea. So my main takeaway from this is your Calathea is just the most awesome plant that you can have. You can see the bamboo is coming through like all over the place. It's literally throwing out shoots everywhere, so it's not doing badly. It's just the frogs don't seem to care about it at all, and it's just better to make sure that they're happy. So giving them a Calathea orbifolia and things with huge leaves that's just going to be the best for them. As with any other species, the obvious things still apply. So you want your rain system, you want your heating to be on a thermostat, you want your lighting to be on timers, so it's automated. We give them around a 12-hour day, I think. It's normally the rule, about 12 hours for day, 12 hours for night. And you'd normally want to give them that temperature drop at night, which I think they do get naturally, because if you keep your enclosure at 24 degrees at constant, during the day it is going to get a little bit higher than 24 degrees, and then at night it's going to go down to that 24-degree level. We find that with all of the Nepenthes as well. We keep the Nepenthes at 18 degrees min, which I'm probably going to lower today actually to 15 degrees min. And then during the day, it spikes up to like 24 degrees or something, because it's just natural. The sun comes into the room, heats everything up, and then throughout the day, it keeps that heat and slowly dissipates. And then by the time you're getting to the end of the day, it's dropping back down to that 18/15 degrees that you want. So our cleaning schedule for these milk frogs, as you can see, everything is dirty. It just is dirty. our cleaning schedule is we spray the entire enclosure twice a week with just blasting water. So it's the same water that we put in their little puddles. We completely blast the enclosure with that water, move all the dirt down into the substrate, where we've got our bioactive substrate, which has springtails in it and isopods, and they basically deal with all the dirt and the muck and everything from the frogs. I would highly recommend having a bioactive enclosure for the frogs because, like I say, they are so susceptible to everything. So having insects in there that are going to eat all of that rubbish that builds up in an enclosure, and having a lot of them, is going to be really essential to success. Otherwise, you're going to be cleaning this every single day, and I mean every single day. Whenever I see any waste from the frogs on literally anything, any leaf that has waste on it, anything on the side, it gets blasted off instantly. So sometimes it is every single day that I'm doing that. And what I'm doing is I'm just blasting it down to the bottom so it can be consumed by that bioactive crew that is just sitting down there, getting rid of all of the waste and recycling it so that you can end up with really cool plants like this Calathea that are just thriving in here, because that's how they get their nutrition. It's like a recycling process. There is one thing that I have learned from the substrate that we did in this enclosure, again, because it was a rush job. The substrate's a bit different to what we do in all the other enclosures. This is a very sandy substrate. Part of that was also because of that bamboo, and bamboos love that sandy texture around their roots so that the water really drains through really quickly. One thing that I would have done is probably use a lot more coco coir and more moss, because it'll keep that wetness in. When these first went in the enclosure, they were sat on moss, and that's how they were soaking in water. It's like how they like to do it. Obviously they had their puddle as well, but they were choosing moss. Yeah, so aiming for a more spongy, less sandy, less gritty substrate, I would really, really recommend, because it will help stop all of these marks that are all over the place, you know? The less stuff that sticks to the frogs, the better. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to probably make the frog's life a bit better. And it's just something that I've learned through trial and error. One other thing that obviously you need, like you need in any enclosure, is some big ass branches. We do have very large branches, which you cannot see going up through the back and going up through the front. I would have liked some larger branches to take it all the way up to that top, like I said, but yeah, I only had one really large branch and I chopped it in half, and that's how we got our structure basically. And then I had this one bamboo column and I just shoved that through, and they actually, for the first, basically until now, they were just sat 1, 2, 3, 4 down that bamboo. But now that the Calathea has gone so mental, they just chill on the Calathea like this boy here. They just sat there. And there's one over there as well. And then you've got one up there and one up there. But they really love to sit on the Calathea. So making sure that that Calathea is clean most of the time is another good idea. I think the final thing that is worth mentioning is when you're feeding crickets to these guys, you want to be a little bit careful. So I feed adult crickets to all of the enclosures, or actually they're large crickets. They're large crickets, they're not quite adult, because I like them to have, you know, a bit of a choice on whether they want an adult or a large. Sometimes you get a few mediums in there, so you get a nice little mix. But obviously with 4 frogs in one enclosure, you're feeding quite a lot more crickets than you would if it was 1 frog. For example, like 1 lizard and 1 lizard in another enclosure. So I would typically feed 10 to each lizard if that's all they're eating. The giant day gecko gets slightly less than that. The tokay gecko gets slightly more than that because she will just eat everything. But when it comes to these guys, you don't want to give them 10 each, because that's going to fill the entire enclosure. And what happens is, if they don't eat them fast enough, then they'll start getting attacked by the crickets, and that has happened to the lizard before. The giant day gecko, that's why he gets less now, because when he had 10 before, one of them clearly started eating him while he was asleep, and he had a little hole in his back, and I had to disinfect him and all of that stuff. So we aim to feed around 15 to 20 to these guys, and that's why they're like crawling all over the enclosure right now. They will eat them as they go. This is more of a wild way of keeping your frogs, so you kind of have to let nature just do its thing. You have to let them live in there, they'll die in there, they'll get recycled into the structure. Like, this is very much wild keeping of lizards and amphibians, and that's how I like to do it. I think that's really everything that I've got in terms of care tips for these guys. If you do have any questions, or you're absolutely... Oh wow, I just see a cricket just dropped into the pond there, so I'm just going to stop that from drowning, because I've just changed that water, and you don't really want crickets drowning in the water. That is one thing that's worth noting. If you ever see a cricket drowned in the water, or feces in the water, which will happen, then change it out straight away. Do not wait, just instantly change it out, because you don't want that bacteria buildup at all. You don't want it there. But I'll continue with my wrap up of this video. So I think that's everything that you need to know about these Amazon milk frogs. If you do have any questions, please let me know. If you are absolutely disgusted by all of the marks on all of the enclosure, I am too. But you won't understand until you get them as to how much effort and work it actually takes to keep this enclosure clean. They are nothing like lizards, absolutely nothing like lizards. Lizards are... I thought lizards was pretty messy, right? But lizards are very, very, very clean. These are messy as hell because they get sticky and they take everything onto the sides and they stick it there. And that's what we do. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. My name's been CJ. Got any questions, drop them in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.